Carlos Nelson with Cascades Media Group, and tonight we're on our History Channel, and we have our resident historian, Miss Brooks, and she's going to be talking about the convention. She's going to be talking about Fannie Lou Hamer. Thursday will be, I believe, the 50th anniversary or 60th. 60th anniversary of Fannie Lou Hamer, her historic speech. And without further ado, welcome to the show, Ms. Brooks.
Good evening. Thank you for having me again. As you stated, the Democratic National Committee is holding their convention in Chicago this week. And this is truly, truly a historic convention in more ways than one. As we stated on Thursday, August the 22nd, it will be the 60th anniversary when the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party made an appeal. Fannie Lou Hamer spoke before the Credentials Committee, and the purpose of her appeal was, at the time, the Mississippi Democratic delegation consisted of all whites. No African Americans were Democratic delegates to the convention. So the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party had held their own convention, had held their own primary, elected their own delegates. They had a multiracial delegation, which a lot of times in history, people think the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party was all Black. It was not. It was comprised of all races. It had individuals from different socioeconomic statuses. So you had farmers, you had domestics, you had clergy, you had some educators. So it was a wide spectrum representative more reflective of Mississippi than what the official delegation was. The delegation was comprised of 68 individuals who had traveled from Mississippi to Atlantic City for this convention. And the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party delegation had the support from 8 states. They did not seek to be seated alone, but they had the support of 8 states. And many, hopefully quite a few, have seen the dynamic testimony of Madam Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer before the committee. Matter of fact, Fannie Lou Hamer's testimony was so powerful that President Lyndon B. Baines Johnson, called a presidential press conference to get her off of the air. Because back then we had 4 channels? And when the president came on, he all the channels covered it. But he did that to keep America from hearing the plight of African Americans in Mississippi.
I thought she was very elegant in the way she expressed herself and expressed our plight, as you put it.
Yes, indeed. She was very elegant in her speaking. She was such a dynamic speaker that there are some historians that have stated her speaking ability, she was on the same level as Dr. King in terms of her persuasiveness. And when you read the testimony, or I encourage you to actually listen to the audio, which is available online, and there will be a link in this presentation so you can hear the audio. But she talks about the horror of life in Mississippi. She was 46 years old when she testified before the committee. But prior to that, Mrs. Hamer had been a sharecropper, worked on a plantation, lived on the plantation, had been there 18 years. Her and her husband had worked there for 18 years. But because she sought to register to vote, she was immediately fired the day that she registered to vote. Her husband was fired from his job, and they were forced to move off of the plantation simply because they tried to register to vote. And what I want people to understand now, you can pick up your cell phone and go to the Secretary of State from any state and register to vote. You can go to the library, public library, and register to vote. Anywhere you can almost register to vote. However, then they had to travel. They traveled, I think it was approximately 20 miles. They rented a bus. It was 18 of them. And they traveled the distance to go to where they had to travel to just to seek to register to vote. Of course, the bus was stopped and the driver was cited for driving a bus of the wrong color. But because of that incident, Mrs. Hamer was arrested and severely beaten in a jail cell. She was beaten so bad that she sustained injuries that impacted her the rest of her life. And the sad thing about it, not only was she beaten, but the sheriffs and the deputies had 2 Black inmates to come in, and they were the ones that beat her. So when individuals talk about historic and how far we have come, we have truly come a mighty long ways. But what people don't understand was the pressure that was put. When those 8 states supported the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, they were threatened by Lyndon Baines Johnson. And he threatened those elected officials that they would have no future in the Democratic Party if they continued to be supportive of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party being seated.
Well, tell me this. We talked off camera and you were mentioning Dr. Martin Luther King and some incidents that took place. Can you tie any of that into what you're talking about now?
Well, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was in Atlantic City, and the Congress of Racial Equality Corps was there, and they were in support of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. And if you go online, you can find the picture of Dr. King addressing CORE. Well, what the Democrats tried to do was to compromise with Fannie Lou Hamer and the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party and said, okay, we've heard your appeal. We will give you 2 seats. And Mrs. Hamer and the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party said, no, we didn't come all this way for no 2 seats. Well, what the compromise was, Dr. King tried to get the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party to accept the 2 seats, and they said no. So that point in history, a lot of times people don't really remember or know that this compromise was offered to them, and Dr. King tried to get them to accept that. And they did not. They stood their ground.
What the problem is, you say they might not remember. You have to be old like myself to remember that. The problem is, why you're on this show right now, so that people that didn't know, now you know. And we have YouTube and we have all these different things. You need to look and learn your history. Now I want to ask you about the convention that's going on right now. And I want to ask you, what do you think Fannie Lou Hamer would be smiling about as it relates to Kamala Harris running for president of the United States right now?
Okay, that's a good question. Can I put a pin in that question?
Please.
Because I want to talk about my experience. I said Thursday will be the 60th anniversary. Well, on the 40th anniversary of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party at the convention, that was in 2004. The convention was in Boston. I had the opportunity to be a delegate. And not only was I a delegate, I was selected and appointed to the same committee that had denied Fannie Lou Hamer. So I'd like to share with you a picture of me at the convention on the floor representing the state of Missouri.
Beautiful. Hey, Miss Brooks, you was young, and oh boy, this is wonderful. Very good picture. I see Missouri delegation in the back.
Yes.
Looks good.
And the T-shirt that I have on in this picture on the floor, I have this T-shirt on tonight.
Stand up, so if you stand up, my audience can see it. Oh, right.
And I had this T-shirt, and this is made by African American business in Kansas City, Missouri. T-shirt King Chris Evans. This T-shirt is 20 years old, and it's still doing its thing. And I wore it on the floor because I wanted to thank and acknowledge the work of the Mississippi Democratic Party. And I talk about thanking them for opening, and down the bottom it says opening the door for me, because now I understand how I got there. And at that particular convention, they had the surviving members of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party there that night. And I had the blessed opportunity to meet some of those individuals. And unfortunately, they had that ceremony then, because shortly afterwards, they began to just die off. But they were honored on the 40th anniversary.
I'm going to give my partner, Chris Evans, a plug also, that you said that shirt was there. Everything you see cascade on, whether sports or what have you, we do business with Black business. And Black business and monogramming, T-shirts, and things of that is Chris Evans and T-shirt King down on 12th Street at Gates Center. Now let's keep moving it on.
All right. Now, we've talked about that experience. I was a delegate in Boston, and I was blessed to be a delegate when President Obama was the nominee. So I've had that experience 2 times.
Talk about what it's like to go to a convention. I've seen Monica Curls, I think, and her mom in a picture today at the convention.
It is a phenomenal experience. You meet people from all over the country, all walks of life. It's electric being there in the facility. But when you're down on the floor, the energy is just awesome. And delegates are positioned, the states are positioned how they are in terms of what is called in play. So the presidential candidate and the vice presidential candidate, their home states will get priority seating. And then the states that are not swing states, but states that they really need, they're up front. So at that particular time, Missouri was a blue state, and we were in place, so we had good position. We was like in Denver, we were right behind New Jersey. So you had Illinois for Obama, Delaware, for Biden, Delaware, and then Missouri. So that's how we were in play then. But it is just an energy. I was on the floor the first time. He was then Senator Barack Obama. I was on the floor that night when he gave this historic speech. And people were like, who is this? Who is this? But I knew who he was because of his work in Illinois as a state senator. And I was serving in the House at the time, Missouri House at the time. But I encourage everyone, if you want a unique opportunity, try to be a delegate. Run to be a delegate. And it's a wonderful experience. Of course, you got to pay your own way. They don't pay, the party does not pay for you to go. You have to pay your own way. You got to pay your own way. But there's creative ways. People had all kinds of things. They was baking, had bake sales, car washes, all kinds of things. But it is a phenomenal experience. It's memorable. You meet every morning. It's a long day though. I'm telling you, you start at like 7 a.m. and you're going to, I would say, at midnight, if not later, because there are workshops where people may not be aware. There are workshops during the day. Start off with your state delegation.
Workshops
on different issues. You start off with your state. Every morning you have a breakfast and a briefing from your state delegation. So all of the Missouri people are in the room, and you have different people come in and speak, and you strategize. And then there are various caucuses. For instance, there may be the Labor Caucus, the Women's Caucus, the Black Caucus, the LGBTQP Caucus. I mentioned educators caucus, because you know the Democrats, we are the rainbow, so we got all kind of caucuses. Okay, got the rural caucus, so they're caucusing over their agenda items, what they want in the president's platform. What do they want in the Harris Walls platform? That's one of the things you do. And then you also have opportunities where you get training to how to do voter engagement, outreach, and all the, because you have candidates are from the federal level all the way down to the local level are all there. So you get a breadth of opportunity to network, and it's just wonderful. And of course, the celebrities are there. That you never know who you'll run into.
I was just getting ready to ask you, boy, it seemed like the talent, political talent that's there. Now you mentioned the celebrities. That seems like the perfect photo op, the Kodak moment.
Oh yeah, I had the opportunity. I was blessed. The night that President Obama received the official nomination, I was blessed to sit in the box in the area where one of the stalwarts of the civil rights movement, he has since transitioned, but he was there and he was sitting there quietly, and I recognized him. So I went, he was on the row behind me, and I went up and went over and I bowed to him, and of course he was embarrassed, but it was just an honor for me to see Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth from Birmingham, Alabama.
Talk about him, because I'm not familiar with him. There are so many figures in this civil rights movement that our community really only focuses on the Kings, the Jacksons, and the headliners.
Yes.
As I said, you're a resident historian. You say you recognized him.
Yes, I recognized him from Birmingham. He was in the Birmingham movement. And if you've ever, I highly recommend, if you have not seen Eyes on the Prize, make sure you see all segments of Eyes on the Prize. And that is a wonderful, very informative documentary about the civil rights movement. And it was just an honor for me to be there. And of course, when President Obama got the official nomination that night, I saw the tears in his eyes. And of course, the room was, whew, because we were on pins and needles, because we didn't know if that convention was going to blow up, because that was the whole Hillary Obama thing. The drama was going on behind the scenes. People don't understand. It was protests outside the arena that night. It had been protests inside. We had been battling inside during the convention, and people just don't know it. So we didn't know. It was like everybody's on pins and needles, because we did not know how the Hillary Clinton faction, if they were going to show up and show out that night. And I know that was when Ted Kennedy was dying, and he came to that convention. He rested all that day, and he made it that night. And that's when he asked for unity. It was saying Puma, party unity. But what we didn't realize, outside there were people that had shirts saying Puma and party unity,
Mm-hmm.
And that's what was going on outside. But inside, so when Ted Kennedy got up, he was literally dying. And he came to that convention and asked for unity. And that's how we didn't have.
Well, you see, they have the Palestinian protests right now outside the convention.
Yes.
I have never really gotten involved in the politics like that. When I think of conventions, because I'm so damn old, I think of Chicago and them putting the dogs, because that was my era, the 60s, the 70s, putting the dogs in the hoses and all of that on the people that were protesting outside. Now let's switch gears and talk about the nominee Kamala Harris, and what do you see that mean to women in general and women of color? This historic deal, and I want you to talk about, you said you looked at the convention last night, Hillary Clinton. How do you feel her address affected uh, the Democrats around the country?
Okay, let me go back. You had mentioned Fannie Lou Hamer. What would I think Fannie Lou Hamer would
Right.
feel? I think Fannie Lou Hamer. We cannot mention Fannie Lou Hamer without talking about Miss Ella Baker. And in preparing for your presentation, this is a letter. This is the letter.
Put it down a little bit. All right. Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. All right. Put it up a little bit so my audience can freeze the frame.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Go ahead and take
this letter is dated July 20th, 1964. And Miss Ella Baker was the coordinator. She was the general. She was a master strategist. And she sent this letter. It was an open letter to the convention delegates. And this is her talking about the 8 states that were supporting the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. And she asked that their entire delegation use their full weight of its prestige and voting strength to see that the challenge was raised by the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party and that they be allowed to be heard. Because first of all, they had to be granted an opportunity to go before the Credentials Committee. And as I stated, I was blessed to have that opportunity to be on the Credentials Committee. The Rules Committee and the Credentials Committee and the Finance Committee, those are powerhouses. And I cannot talk about Senate Vice President Harris without mentioning Shirley Chisholm, without mentioning Ron Brown, without mentioning Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. And the reason I say Ron Brown, when Reverend Jackson ran in 1984, there was a Coming to Jesus meeting, several Coming to Jesus meetings. So Ron Brown was appointed the chair of the DNC, and that's when he, with his power and the strength of those who had supported Reverend Jackson, the rules of the Democratic Party were changed, and our convention has guidelines and policies that state a certain percentage got to be women, certain percentage got to be Blacks, certain percentage. So it was no longer just in the control of a few that used to be the delegates. It opened our party up. And we have to remember that the work that those people that supported Jesse Jackson and became delegates, ran to be delegates, and came to that convention in 84 and 88, all of them paved the way for where we are now. And I said Fannie Lou Hamer, Ella Baker, Merle Evans. People forget about her because she carried on. Medgar Evers, she carried on her husband's work. There are so many unknown individuals.
You pulled up Ron Brown, and that's my homeboy out of New York, and he had a hotel I used to go to all the time.
Yes.
Yeah. And that plane crash that killed him.
Yes.
I think he was a bright star for our community.
Yes, he was.
I hadn't heard his name since his death until you mentioned
a lot of and people got to remember he was the Secretary of Commerce when he was killed.
Right. He had they got in and he got a good position.
Yes. But the changing of the rules is what opened the door for a lot of individuals that are now elected officials that you now see on the stage. And the thing about it, I hope somewhere that these African-American elected officials that we have now know the history of it.
I don't think most of them know at this point.
It is our responsibility to make sure that they do know, that we call these names, mention and talk about what they've done. A lot of people don't. The challenges that individuals, the litigation that they file for voting to get rid of the poll tax. And you got individuals there, all you have to do is use your phone to register to vote. When people used to have to pay to be able to register to vote, and as I stated, travel. They rented a bus to go to another county because that's where the seat was for you to go register to vote.
I remember, like I said, I'm 73. And when I would go to South Carolina back in the 60s and early 50s, you might go to register and get beat the heck up. And
Or
you
lose
might
your job.
yeah, you might have went 20 miles for nothing. Because
Exactly.
yeah, and I don't believe our current group of representation really know the history of the Black struggle. They're involved in it, but they don't know even the people that wrote these laws. See, you're talking legislation and what have you that allow them to even have the seat that they have.
Exactly. And as I stated, the individuals that filed the lawsuits, a lot of them lost their livelihood and some lost their lives merely for the chance, opportunity to vote, to be a part of democracy.
So again, now let's get back to Hillary because I was
okay.
doing some things and I caught the end of her speech, but
okay.
I was the audience. How do you think they received it, and how do you think the nation received it?
I thought I thought it was a very good message. She cracked the glass ceiling, and now on November the 5th, finally the glass ceiling will be broken. I'm claiming it in the name of Jesus ahead of time. That's how I feel about it. Okay. But many years, and when we talk about August the 19th was the 104th anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment. Now we all know that gave women the right to vote. However, the majority of African American women in the US, because our population was primarily in the South, the majority did not gain the right to vote until the 1960s with the passage of the Federal Voting Rights Act. And we can never forget that. Yes, we had African American women that voted before 1920. Yes, we had African American women that ran for political office in 1920 statewide. Magdalena Walker, the founder of a Black bank, ran statewide in Virginia in 1920. All of this is not in our history book. So this is no short span. We've been working on this long time. Other women that we must
drip to fill the bucket, and you have to have patience in the system in which we're governed under.
I also must mention Mary McLeod Bethune. We cannot.
They have they have a university named after her?
Yes, Bethune-Cookman University.
All right.
Dorothy Irene Height. We cannot talk about the struggle without them. We have to mention those women. Dr. Betty Shabazz, we got to remember her and the sacrifices that she continued on after Brother Malcolm lost his life.
Who would you say here in Kansas City that Black women that have made any type of contribution politically per se on the somewhat level that these national figures that you mentioned?
I will have to yield to that question at this time.
All right.
Okay.
I can't name. So I know right off the top of your head, there's probably some, but
I said, but I would have to think about it, and I don't want to make up misspeak.
That's what I like about you, Ms. Brooks. You're not talking about nothing that you don't have documentation on. And I want to tell you this, and I'm going to say this on camera. I had some conversations about you the other night with some people. And these are, like I told you, I've been learning a lot about you. They told me that they thought you could have been a senator, that they got a lot of people, and I might be offending people now, that are in our political ranks, but they said that you were smart as hell and you did all the research and that you could have had a real political career representing our community. So with that out the way, I thought I needed to say that. It's like giving flowers while you still on this side. There are a lot of people that have that opinion of you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Nelson. I appreciate that very much.
I don't
Thank
suck
you.
up to my audience. I don't suck up to people.
Okay. I know you don't. God knows I know you don't. But thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Yeah, so
now, in terms of how we must move forward and how Hillary, I thought her message was very encouraging and uplifting. I felt that she was basically being supportive of the Vice President Harris and the movement and saying it's time. I've run this race. It's just like relay race. We pass the baton. We're passing the baton.
I think the whole that passing the baton and that dynamic with Biden and the contrast, the visual, him gray and Kamala Harris and them. I think that's unbeatable, and I think our nation will be on a new trajectory, and I don't believe it's just talk.
All right. Also, I am so proud that the fact that HBCUs are highlighted. We have always produced outstanding individuals from HBCUs, and now HBCUs are in the spotlight. And so that's another positive element to this.
So in closing, what would you have to say to our audience? And I want you to, in your closing, talk to them about the importance of Black history.
Black history, first of all, is U.S. history.
Right.
It's American history. It's just has not been included in the textbook except for a brief mention in certain instances of enslavement, brief mentions of the Civil War, but all of our history pre-vote, we were great people and we have a history. So it's imperative. It's no excuse for us not to know our history now. You're a taxpayer, utilize your public library. They have a wealth of information. It's so much information on this site, Cascade Media Group, on other online sites. You have the opportunity. And in terms of voting and the importance of it, your vote matters. You have the opportunity to vote for the future of yourself and your family. Just like a vote was made to pass that economic stimulus package. And some of us that are watching right now know that they received a stimulus check. They got that $1,400. Their small business received that PPPL, Paycheck Protection Loan. Their employer got it. They may not know it, but that's kept a lot of businesses impacted. There are some that have received student loan forgiveness or modification. All of those things are public policy. And some receive that child tax credit, extra incentive, where they receive, what was it, $300 a month extra per child?
My youngest daughter got that.
Yeah, hello? But all of that had to be voted upon. It had to be voted in committee. It had to be voted in the House. It had to be voted on the Senate. And then somebody had to sign it. And if they hadn't had the votes to pass it, the individuals, wouldn't have received it. So your vote does matter. I ask people to take the time to be informed prior to going to the polls. Especially in Missouri, there will be 5 ballot questions on the ballot in addition to the candidates. So those ballot measures are very important, and please take the time to go online and pull a ballot out and read it. You can go to 411.org, put in your address, and it will pop up and show you all the candidates in your area, and it will have the ballot issue. That's 411.org. The League of Women Voters will be having forums. Other organizations will be having forums, but it's important to be an informed voter. And lastly, in Missouri, if a person is an ex-offender and have completed probation and parole, they regain their right to vote in Missouri. Kansas also allows ex-offenders to vote, but I don't know the stipulations for Kansas. Just look it up. Both Kansas and Missouri do allow elected officials, elected officials, do allow ex-offenders to vote once they've completed probation and parole in Missouri.
And that's real, because I'm an ex-offender and I vote every election.
All right. I want to thank you so much for this opportunity. And once again, Thursday, August the 22nd, will be the 60th anniversary of Fannie Lou Hamer and the Mississippi Democratic Freedom Party challenging the structure of the Democratic Party in America.
All right. I want to close with this. When you go to our network, 2 days ago, we just had the chairperson of the Foresight election board on, and it was a very interesting interview. He talked about what the election board does. He's been chairman down in Forsyth, North Carolina, and I think that's perfect to tie in with what Ms. Brooks is speaking about elections, and he tells you what your rights are, talks about gerrymandering and how the system works and how important it is for us to have confidence in our electoral system. And with that being said, as we always close, when you invest in your community, you're really just investing in yourself. Good night.
This is brought to you by Kansas City Business Association, working to improve our community.